let us open one more perspective, and it is to be done by Mr. Christian Kuna. I'm sorry to pronounce your family name maybe incorrectly, but this EU response to this cyber resilience in the time of a conflict in Ukraine makes us a little bit nervous. So hopefully you will have all solutions on your presentation. Nevertheless, we very much rely on the European capabilities. So if we are a good part of it, so give us a good news that we are also the one good partner where you can rely on, please.
Well, thank you very much, Aisteres. I hope I won't disappoint too much with this short presentation, but I just wanted to say, first of all, that it's an honor to be here, and thank you very much for inviting the European Commission. I work in DG Connect in the directorate which is responsible for cybersecurity policy, but also increasingly trying to engage with and support member states, particularly the amazing work of the CERTs around Europe, BIBERs in particular, and also the authorities responsible for cybersecurity at an operational level, and Edgar's section in and the MOD here in Latvia is a shining example of a highly valued member of this cybersecurity community across the EU. I also wanted briefly to pay tribute to the resilience of Latvia in this time of heightened vigilance and risk, and it's a tribute to the investment that they have made in hardening their cybersecurity systems and networks over recent years. That I think someone mentioned Armageddon or apocalypse this morning, that hasn't happened, but we remain as vigilant as ever. I'm going to give, I thought Edgar's presentation was excellent, and I don't want to duplicate what he has said. I can't compete, but I would like to give some more policy context and perhaps go into a bit more detail about at least two of the instruments, policy instruments, legal instruments, which Edgar's mentioned at an EU level, which may be of interest to you, but also just to situate it in the strategy which has been in place since the end of 2020. Of course, you know, the world for Europe changed on the 24th of February. It changed in terms of its geopolitics, but also in terms of its posture in relation to cybersecurity. But already with the strategy, just under 2 years ago, there was an acknowledgement that cyberspace had become the site of geopolitical tension. Authoritarian governments, of which Russia is obviously one, had been working for many years against the principle of a free and open and rules-based internet. It was also premised on the principle, on the development over recent years of connecting everything, so that the attack surface for hostile actors is now greater than ever. And it was also premised on the security concerns that there was that served as a disincentive to digitalization, and for this European Commission, the two greatest priorities have been the green and digital transformations. Indeed, in relation to the green agenda, weak cybersecurity results in the need to, for example, duplicate data storage. It results in the waste of cheap, insecure connected goods which aren't patched when they're compromised. So all of it's connected. And then finally, the skills shortage, which has already been mentioned today. When we wrote the strategy, it was reported that there were 291,000 unfilled posts in the area of cybersecurity in the EU. I suspect that number is even greater now. And indeed, in the week that the Commission and the High Representative published the cybersecurity strategy, that very same week, in December 2020, the SolarWinds hack went public. Thousands of companies and government offices were affected, including EU institutions, bodies, and agencies themselves. And over the following 6 to 9 months, we saw the zero-day exploits in the Microsoft Exchange server. We saw the Irish Health Service hit by ransomware with real on-the-ground impact. We saw the US largest fuel pipeline operator, Colonial Pipeline, hit, and also its largest meat supplier. So just to recall the strategy, what you can see is that it aims to be comprehensive. So investment, regulation, but also more general policies, and it had something to say for all communities. Cyber defense was mentioned this morning, quite rightly, and that's certainly something that was addressed within the strategy. And you can see from the pillars of action that I think 26 strategic actions were set out on which we've made some progress. They're grouped around resilience, operational cooperation, and diplomacy. We've had less than 2 years, but there has been progress. We've had to activate, for example, our diplomacy actions in terms of, in the face of Russian aggression this year, in particular in the attribution of the attack on the Viasat satellite communications network. I won't be able to cover all of this strategy, but I just thought it would be good to give you a very brief overview like this before going into detail on some of the policy developments, as well as touching on the operational aspects of what the EU is doing. But since on policy and law, since 2016, there's been, I think, an unprecedented building up of a cyber framework in the EU. The EU has pioneered in other areas like data protection, similar legal frameworks, and we believe that what we're doing on cybersecurity together will be a point of reference for the rest of the world. And you can see that this has taken place in a very short period of time, from the first NIS directive in 2016 to now being very close to having its successor, NIS2, being adopted, and now just in the last 2 weeks, the adoption of a new proposal on cyber resilience, which I will come to. So just something of a deep dive into NIS2 and what it looks like. You'll see that it has a broader scope compared with the previous NIS directive. It focuses on criticality and scale and the potential for real-world harm. It applies across the supply chain, and it's also aligned with rules on the resilience of physical infrastructure, which is a proposal which was adopted at the same time. And the directive, it is a directive, and so that recognizes that member states are at the center of how it will be implemented. Authorities and national coordinated vulnerability disclosure, all of this will take place within member states. There's accountability for risk management and compliance at the highest level within organizations, but also, although it's a directive, there is a strong framework for cooperation and harmonization, as Edgar was saying earlier, between the different member states and their national frameworks in transposing the directive. The sectors which are covered has been expanded compared with the previous directive. So it looks at what are the likeliest targets for malicious activity and for compromise, as well as looking at maturity and the potential impact if there is a successful attack. The new directive adds data centers, electronic communications services, space assets, public administration, manufacturing, and food. So you can see that it's fairly comprehensive, and there is of course a higher harmonization. That was one of the problems that the new directive was seeking to address. But it also aims to be proportionate. So there's a distinction between essential and important entities, and the rules which apply to important entities are a lighter touch than for essential entities. And as with any EU directive, enforcement will be absolutely key. So fines are eye-catching, and that's a deliberate choice of the legislator, because it gains the attention in C-suites if there is a major breach. And this the approach to NIS feeds into how we manage crises in practical terms, and I'm not going to go into great detail here. Aisteres has covered so much of this already, and it's fair to say that the EU is only as strong as the sum of its parts, and Latvia, although it's a small member state, certainly punches above its weight. It's part of this new framework of Cyclone, which again has been mentioned, this mechanism, this grouping, which will have a legal basis under NIS 2. It's composed of national authorities, plus the Commission, where there is an impact, or likely to be an impact, on the EU's critical infrastructure and internal market. And the Commission's involvement also reflects its existing role in crisis management and in situational awareness in more general mechanisms such as IPCR, the mechanism which is activated when there is a need for a coordinated response to an international crisis, such as is the case now. And also the Emergency Response Coordination Centre, which is part of the Union's civil protection framework. So related to all of this is that we're encouraging and facilitating the investment in cyber threat detection. You should expect in years to come a lot of focus on security operations centres, and we are trying to support member states in ensuring that they are powered by the latest technology, machine learning and AI, and also that they're connected. So that was just a brief diversion into operational cooperation. But going back to the other big, if you like, legislative development in the EU this year, the Cyber Resilience Act. We have for years in the EU had frameworks for product safety, but cyber security aspects of products has tended to be neglected, at least on the European level in terms of legislation and regulation. I remember listening to Bruce Schneier many years ago saying that there had been a race to connect everything, but that security had been sacrificed for the sake of cost and connectivity. So what we were trying to address with this proposal for the CRA is the lack of incentives that we see in the market to invest in cybersecurity. And we know from experience with the NIS directive that 2/3 of incidents are the result of vulnerability exploitation. 1/3 is other incidents, and that's the fundamental problem that we're trying to address. And the EU isn't alone in this. There are moves in the US, in the UK, Singapore, and Japan to address issues of cybersecurity of products. But I think in many ways what we've done in the proposal is quite unique in its ambition and in its scope. So the main elements of the proposal, it addresses about 50% of products on the market. It creates obligations for producers, distributors, and importers, but it also creates an obligation on producers even after their product has been put on the market, up to 5 years of a life cycle. So the accountability is maintained. There's a conformity assessment, which in most cases would be a self-assessment. There's an obligation to protect from unauthorized access, but the proposal doesn't prescribe how that should be done. Products should be patched without delay, and if they're exploited, there's an obligation to inform ENISA in 24 hours so that other certs can be informed. And it covers products, by which we mean hardware, software, but not non-commercial projects, and not services such as cloud services. And it doesn't affect existing rules for products within particular sectors where there are already rules, such as for cars, medical devices. So that was just an overview of some of the work that we've been doing. I just wanted to finish with a quote from our commissioner on the day that the Cyber Resilience Act was adopted 2 weeks ago. So we're only as strong as our weakest link. I could add in the current, what this year I think has taught us is that we're only as strong as the weakest link, including partner countries, and that's why, again, we have been deeply impressed and also doing everything that we can to support Ukraine in its cyber resilience against the hybrid attacks of the enemy. I hope that was helpful and interesting, and very interested in.
Now, because of Canadians did it, now you should do it. Liels paldies. Could you pronounce it for us?
Liels paldies.
Wow, good. That was precise. Thank you. Thank you. You know, you mentioned us as a small nation. For us, it's always nice to have these paldies in Latvian language. Now, questions, remarks. Something was not clear so far. Thank you, actually, for giving us this short kind of, few minutes after the adoption of this paper, you give the full coverage of it to explain it. Can I ask you a kind of, in a way, it's maybe not in a context anymore, but you probably remember like 2 years ago, we were so much pointing at certain Chinese technologies that they are the ones who are threatening us, who will, poison all the markets. And there was this kind of commercial explanation to this, that we should not allow them in the market, it is not secure. And our good friends over Atlantic even, say that if you do it, then no, there is a problem, big one. And now in Brussels, from the point of view of Brussels, which is the larger threat to Europe of today, of end of 2020, of 2022? The Russian behavior, or actually Chinese technologies, or someone who wants to come with certain reasons, with probably different interests, with still technologies they want to misuse in a way against us? we are promising you not to quote you in local press.
Yes.
So you can speak as, you know, professional. We are not referring to someone, or let's refer to someone from European Commission.
Yes, they'll never know it was me.
No one knows your name. Forget it.
One of the pillars of the strategy that I was presenting earlier is technological sovereignty. And it's interesting if you have discussions around, you know, member states, that's a very contested term, these notions of sovereignty, autonomy, etc. Because for some it means protectionism. For others it means, you know, being in control of your own systems and your own digital destiny. So we've applied and we've achieved a consensus in specific areas such as on 5G technologies. There was a very fruitful collaboration between member states in the NIS cooperation group to develop guidelines on the use of 5G technologies. And it was all based on risk assessment. So we're not singling out any particular nation state as the big threat, but it is clear that in adopting technologies, it has to be on the basis of an objective assessment of threat, and also resilience means that you don't become dependent on any particular links in the supply chain, and that's not just in 5G, but that's throughout the strategy. One of the things that we've been trying to promote. What I might also add is that one of the, you know, I was really interested in what was said in the previous panel about whether or not this is a cyber war. But what is certainly interesting this year is just the multiplicity of actors who have emerged. And it's never entirely clear who they're acting on behalf of, although we may have our own suspicions, which means that the landscape is complicated and potentially dangerous, and so we have to be very, very careful about becoming dependent on any particular suppliers within the whole supply chain.
Okay, thank you for actually being so talkative, but also safeguarding as an official of the European Union. Of course, you have to represent this like balance in any kind of approaches. So this we definitely need. Any questions, remarks? Yes, please.
Once again, I do have a question. If I understand, one of the legislative incentives intends that those who produce consumer devices will have to supply those with patches. Can we expect that when at some point in time our smartphones will stop working when they will run out of vendor support, or at least will turn from being smartphones to dumb phones?
I certainly hope not, and I don't think that could be, if it does happen, it wouldn't be a result of the Cyber Resilience Act. Smartphones are an interesting example where you know, they tend to be quite secure because they tend to be they tend to have, you know, some of the biggest companies in the world behind them and looking after their security. But there's certainly an issue with products which are put on the market, which potentially create a risk, expand the attack surface with security is just an afterthought or not even a thought at all. And that's what we try to address in the proposal.
Okay, but behind these smartphones, if there is intention like this, named by Oscars, for any kind of digital devices, even those are coming from the family of Internet of Things or something like this, will it be harder regulated when it enters, for example, a market in Europe, but is produced somewhere, let's say China or United States or whatever?
Well, the same rules would apply. So it's just as with any products which are placed on the market within the EU. It doesn't matter where they come from; they have to conform to EU rules. So it's not like where this is a new area of law, but it's based on decades of precedence in other aspects of product safety.
Oh yes, in any kind of. Thank you. Thank you very much for update from Brussels. Thank you. This is always very nice to have these updates here in conferences, which are, by the way, observed by 30 countries from around the world. So stage you've been using was actually, the European one. You covered all continent, most probably, and even beyond. Thank you. Thank you.